All right, welcome everybody to this Encore presentation of the Awaken Your Intuition masterclass. I'm so excited to share this with y'all today. So welcome everybody. I am Veronika Archer, and I am an intuitive guide that supports mostly high achievers and recovering perfectionists to break free from the impacts of past traumatic relationships so you can be free to be open to being loved again and to find calm and peace in your life, as well as fulfillment. It's a big part of what we do here in this space as well. So today, as I mentioned in the email, is I'm going to be briefly going over a couple of four principles that are really important to what we're talking about here today. I'm not going to be going back over the things we discussed in the original Awaken Your Intuition masterclass. I am going to be covering some different topics today, but I am going to be going through two main principles that everyone needs to be familiar with and comfortable with in order to really understand what I am talking about here today. And then I am going to share responses to three questions that I received that I thought were such good questions, and I wanted to share the response with everyone here in this space and all the replay watchers. I know we have quite a few people watching the replay. And then after that, I'm going to open it up to y'all for questions. So probably be about 30 minutes, no more than that, of me sharing here, and then you guys will have the opportunity to ask questions. So pop in, and you can ask questions about something from the previous masterclass or anything that I shared today as well. So pop question in the chat box if you came here today with a question on this topic that you wanted to get answered. And while you all are doing that, I'm just going to share quickly, for those of you that are here live and even those of you that are watching on replay, I encourage you, if you're on your computer, to close any tabs that are open and turn your phone upside down or on silent so it's not distracting you. If you're on your phone, turn the notifications off, grab a pen and paper and take notes, and really give yourself this time to be really present and to really be able to receive and absorb what you came here today, what you came here today to get out of this moment. So hi Eric. Okay, I'm gonna look at chats really quick. So I got one question from Mahalia. Hi, how can we tap into our intuition as practice? Okay, so we'll go ahead and address that at the end, Mahalia, and hopefully I'm saying your name correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and start with some basic principles for y'all, and then I'm going to go through some of the questions. All right. So let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm not going to spend too much time on PowerPoint, but I did just want to share a couple things here for y'all at the beginning. Okay. So there are two principles that I really want you all to walk away with if you haven't already. I know some of y'all that are here live, and those of you that are watching on replay, there's two really important principles I want you to walk away with. So I encourage you to write down these two principles and take notes on this. So the first one is it's really important to understand that we are driven, our whole experience in this life is driven by imprints. And we're not going to go into this today. Y'all are familiar with this, many of you. But the key point is to know that an imprint is a message that you took on from an experience. And that message exists in different layers in your system. So I'm going to come back to talk about the different layers in your system. And that imprint is what's actually attracting things to you. It's also what's causing you to make certain decisions. It's what's contributing to confusion. And perhaps most importantly for some of you in this space, it is the imprints that are actually powering or causing ruminations where you're thinking about your ex or thinking about a situation over and over again, and triggers, which is when you are triggered into a very deep emotion that's perhaps disproportionate to the situation that you're in or doesn't match the situation that you're in. So that's the first thing that I want you all to walk away with, is understanding that imprints are what is driving you. Then the other thing, which I'm not going to spend a ton of time on here, if you were at my masterclass earlier this year, we learned about the 7 energy layers. And so I'm just going to, for those of you that are not familiar with this, I'm just going to very briefly share about these 7 energy layers. And then we're going to talk about how all this ties back into your intuition and being free from triggers and ruminations. Okay. So, the first at the, oops, I think there's a piece of this graphic missing. There we go. Because it was on animation. Okay. So at our core level we typically notice this within our body. We have 3 foundational layers. So that's what we're going to be talking about here today. And that's what I'm covering in the Freedom Foundations course that begins later this week. So it's the somatic, which is the physical, the emotional layer, and the cognitive, the mental, your thoughts. So those are your 3 foundational layers. Then there's the 4th layer, which is the electromagnetic layer. Everything in our bodies and our system, our organs, and everything that we're comprised of, our thought patterns, is emitting energy waves. And we've actually studied this and measured these electromagnetic waves that our body, that our system is putting off. You will hear me use the word system instead of body. So if you're new to that, you may want to write that down in your notes as well. When I say system, I mean everything. Our mind, the 7 layers basically, our mind, our emotions, our physical body, our energy body, the way that we interact with other people, that's our whole system, okay? So our system puts off electromagnetic waves that are about 6 inches to 3 feet from our body. We then also have a larger energy body, which expands 3 to 6 feet out. So if you are, especially if you're an empath or a highly sensitive person, and you find you are absorbing other people's emotions, or you're really sensitive to stimulation, it's likely that you're really tuned into or experiencing life in your energy body. So that's your 5th layer. Going through this really fast because we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but your 6th layer is the energy fabric. So this is the way that you interact with others. So imagine that everyone is putting off these frequencies that are emitting outside of our physical bodies. So often in healing, we're really focused internally in our bodies, but we're emitting these frequencies. And those frequencies, and so is plants and animals, by the way, and all of life is emitting these frequencies, and we're interacting with them. And so sometimes when we're in a lot of pain, it may actually be because we're interacting with other people who are in pain, and we're actually picking those things up like an antenna. So that energy fabric where we are interacting with other people is the 6th energy layer. And then the 7th layer is source, which is the energy source, sort of the origin source of all these energy waves that are interacting. So those are the 7 energy layers. So how does this factor into what we're talking about here? So if I'm going to break it down to the first 3. So the first 3, the foundational layers, are your mental, emotional, and your body, your physical layer. So if you're someone who's stuck, we talked about this in the first masterclass quite a bit, so I won't stay here too long, but if you're someone who's stuck in your healing, it's often because you're trying to outthink your problems. You're in a talk therapy or journaling or doing affirmations that are all coming from your mind. Okay, so the second principle, so the first principle is that we're run by imprints, right? So all of your things that you're attracting and things that you're attracting, and then also decisions that you're making. So receiving and giving, both ways, are run by your imprints. That's your first principle. The second principle is that we have 7 energy layers, and your imprints are showing up on all 7 layers. So if you are someone who's stuck in your healing, there might be a couple different reasons for that. One often is that we really focus, as I just said, on the mental aspect of things, okay? So that's one reason why you might get stuck. Some people get stuck because they actually, especially a lot of people I interact with, because I tend to work with folks like you who are high achievers, you're doing a lot of research, you're out there trying to figure out what's going on, and many of you have are either heavily into or dabbled into different types of energy practices. And something I hear from people is, I'm really attached to my ex, and I've gone and done cord cutting, which I have a whole opinion on, but we won't go into that here. But it didn't work, right? So it's not that there's necessarily anything wrong with cord cutting, depending on how you view things. However, you may have simply bypassed healing on these foundational 3 layers and moved straight into your energy layers. So shamanic rituals, I hear people talk about, they think they're karmically bonded to their ex, and so they start trying all these different things. And the reason that they're still stuck is because they actually haven't first started healing on these lower 3 layers. So now I'm going to touch briefly on how imprints show up, and then understand how that goes back to your intuition, okay? And I'm just going to pause for a minute and make sure I didn't miss anything here in the chat, or any new participants are not in the waiting room. I think we're all good. Awesome. Okay. So all of your layers together are basically function like an antenna. And this antenna, as I mentioned a moment ago, is attracting things like your romantic relationships, the kinds of people that you are either choosing to be with or actually literally magnetizing into your experience, into your life. Your money. Sometimes people ask me if this works on financial blocks. It's not what we're really here to talk about today. But yes, so all of your layers together are functioning as this antenna that attracts your experience that you're having with money. And then your relationships, and all your relationships. So your relationships with your children. We talked about this a little bit in the in the first masterclass, how healing can really impact your children directly and indirectly. So all of these things together are working as an antenna system. Oops, I keep going the wrong way. And so then basically what you've got is you've got these imprints. So these are wounded imprints, right? So your wounded imprints are basically affecting all of the layers, all 7 layers really, but here we're focusing on the 3 foundational, and then out here we've got, our energetic layers, 4, 5, and 6. So your wounded imprints are actually impacting each of these layers, which are then impacting your antenna and what you attract into your life, and what you're creating and the decisions that you're making. So the way that you actually want, the process that I'm talking about here today and how this ties into your intuition, is that you can actually connect with the pure level of each of these layers. So in other words, you can get to a space where you can identify that you are being triggered on the emotional level. Or you can identify that your body is reacting to a trauma that's trapped within the body. And you can be so deeply connected that you're like, okay, I recognize this as a trigger or as a trauma or as a wounded imprint. Therefore, I know not to listen to this. And I'm going to tune in to the clear aspect of all my layers. And when I'm tuned into the clear aspect, the one that's not being driven by my wounded imprints, that's when I'm able to receive information from all those layers and make decisions based on that. So your intuition is really you receiving information from all of your layers, but you're receiving it in a way that it's not overpowered by your imprint. So the process that I guide people through, and the process that we're going through in Freedom Foundations, is to be able to be connected in such a deep level that you're able to connect with that part of you that is not being powered by that imprint. So, for example, with healing, for some of the things that might happen is that perhaps you've done a lot of talk therapy or something like that, and you feel pretty good on the cognitive level, and you've sort of released that imprint on that layer, but you've still got these imprints functioning on all these other layers, which is why I hear from people things like, I've been doing work for 2 years, for 4 years, for however long, and I'm still feeling stuck. It's because you still have imprints showing up on these other layers. Okay. So those are the basic principles, right, that I want you to walk away with from today. And I went through that pretty quickly, right? But 1, you're run by imprints. 2, you've got 7 layers. Your bottom 3 layers are your foundation. And so if you are bypassing and moving on to other aspects of healing without really having been really grounded and healed in your foundational 3 layers, you're going to continue to be seeing patterns repeating. So you want to heal on all 7 layers. You want to start with the bottom 3, or you make sure that you're really solid in the bottom 3. And you're also able to, when you're connecting to your intuition, is really about connecting to those 7 different layers and being able to hear those layers. So you're not distracted by your imprints. Okay. So if you're taking notes, those are the basic principles I want you to walk away with. All right, so I'm going to walk through the top 3 questions that I received, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'll start with Mahalio's question after that, and then open it up to the rest of y'all. So the first question or comment that I got about this healing work is that I don't want to get re-triggered. So this concern that if I start looking at my triggers and ruminations, and I start working on healing, and even if so you may have just heard me say, I get really quiet and connect with my layers, my intuition, that can be scary for people, because when you get quiet and still, your pain can come up, which is why oftentimes people disassociate, right? So I totally get that you don't want to relive your past experiences. It's painful. It's also overwhelming. It can also be time consuming because something comes up. I don't know if anyone's ever experienced like a therapy session where you talk about things and then you're like in tears for 2 or 3 days afterwards because you're thinking about all the things that came up. I know that's something that I've definitely experienced, or even just sharing with friends something traumatic, and then you're just in it, right? So what I want to make clear is that in this process that I talk about and that I teach in Freedom Foundations, we're actually not revisiting your traumas, right? So it's actually about what I just shared in that PowerPoint, where you are getting rid of those sad faces, right? And you are those wounded imprints, and you're learning to connect to your system and be able to hear your intuition. So you're basically connecting with the messages that your layers are sending you, and you're distinguishing what is a clear layer and what is an imprint. So you don't actually have to go back and talk about or relive all of your bad experiences. I'm going to give you an example that came up to me. I find it funny, I don't know, but I'll share it anyway. So imagine that you have a refrigerator with a door that like keeps popping open. This happened to me. That's probably why it came up for me. And then every time you walk by your refrigerator, you push it closed and you notice that it's popped open. And of course, like all your food is going bad, especially if your freezer is connected to that same door. And you push it closed. So when you push it closed, that might be you doing some kind of work, that healing work that's not lasting for you, right? But it keeps popping back open. And then as you look at it, you realize that maybe the hinge is bad. And so you're like, oh, I'm going to replace the hinge. And you replace the hinge, and once the hinge is replaced, the door stays closed, right? Now, you don't need to notice or talk about the fact that maybe the hinge is broken because somebody kept pouring water on it and it got rusty. And then maybe there was a musician living in the house, and every time he walked past the refrigerator with his drumsticks, he was hitting the poor hinge with his drumsticks, and it had all kinds of dents in it. Right? So you don't need to know that. You don't need to examine it. You don't need to understand the story of the hinge. You just need to know that it's not working and that you're going to replace it. So this is the process that I share with people, and that I'm teaching in Freedom Foundation, which is coming up next week. It's to learn how to connect with that like pure source inside of you, which you may refer to as intuition, and to essentially identify when you're being triggered and where your imprints are, and be able to, in a way, bypass it by being able to really hear those messages that you're receiving from your system, so that your antenna is actually attracting what you want. And you can really start trusting yourself and start feeling confident in the things that you're doing. All right, so question number 2 that I get this one a lot too. I've tried all the things, and what's different about this? So I get that question a lot because, as I mentioned, I tend to work with people who are really like motivated and ambitious and successful in other areas of their life. And so they've put a lot of effort into their healing already and done a lot of research. So what's different about this? So honestly, this process that I share here, I started to say I developed it over the course of about 5 years. But really looking back, it's probably my whole lifetime of experience, right? So it's a combination of my education as a biologist and then my personal experience, which is more of a lifetime, with practices like mindfulness and yoga and tantric philosophy, not sexual tantra, which is a whole different thing here in the West, learning how to connect with intuition, and then understanding empaths and energy work, and then finally being trained as a quantum healer. So the sort of really the training aspects of those, spanned about 5 years. And the professionals that I learned from over that course of time are not people who do trauma recovery. They're not people who do narcissistic abuse recovery, right? They were teaching about quantum science. They were teaching about intuition. And so I took all of these knowledge and experiences that I had and combined them through this lens of trauma recovery and narcissistic abuse recovery. So that's a big part of what is different about this. And I'm not saying that no one out there does the same things that I do, but I am saying that there isn't like a keyword I can give you and be like, go search, go do a Google search on this, and it's going to teach you how to do this. Right. So again, it's a process that I developed over the course of about 5 years. And now I work with clients in, 6 and 10 month programs where they're able to get through that process much quicker. And then in Freedom Foundations, I'm sharing how to really hone in on your bottom 3 foundational layers. So we're able to cover that in 8 weeks. So it's much different from the many years that it took me to get there. So the other sort of part of that is, wanting to be able to sort of research it and then do it on your own. And there's some comments that I get from people when I work with them. One is, oh, I thought I knew everything about energy work, but I've never approached it like this. And when I do, it made all the difference, and all of a sudden it clicked, and all of a sudden it started working. And it's because I do combine the cognitive, somatic, and emotional levels as well as the energetic layers, and then combine all those together. Another comment I get a lot is, I thought I knew what my imprint was, but now I realize I was focusing on the wrong thing. So how this process is a little bit different. It's kind of similar to if you've injured a muscle. So my son broke and sprained his ankle this past summer, so this one is on my mind. And you can research like how to heal from an ankle sprain, or if anyone's ever done that. But some of the exercises that you get is my hand's like an ankle. You move your ankle. You like do the alphabet. You move your ankle around, and you're trying to strengthen and loosen and stretch all the different muscles and tendons and ligaments that are in your ankle. Well, I had a friend who was doing that, and it wasn't helping. And then she went to a physical therapist and discovered that she actually had a weakness in her calf muscle, and she had to do exercises for her calf muscle. So a lot of times in healing work, it's like that. When we try to do it on our own, we may think we understand, and we may be really focused on one thing, but then it turns out you were focusing on the ankle when actually your calf muscle was weak. So that kind of thing. So okay, the third question that I got is, I need to regulate my system before I can do the healing work. So I definitely understand this, and it's very likely that if you had a traumatic relationship, or if you're still dealing with triggers and ruminations, that your body is in fight or flight. And And it is helpful to learn some basics to calm your system down. But as I mentioned in the previous response that I gave to the first question, right, about I don't want to relive my trauma, this process is actually not about going back and revisiting all of your bad experiences, right? So it's not about re-triggering yourself. So the other aspect of that, though, I need to regulate my system before I can do healing work. So when you focus on system regulation, you are only focusing on one aspect. It's your somatic layer that you're working on when you're doing system regulation. And so you may get to a point where you are no longer in fight or flight, and you may actually have some feelings of calm, because that's what happens when you regulate your system. You come out of that anxiety and you move into calm. But remember, your imprints are showing up on all 6 layers, certainly on your foundational 3 layers, right? So now you've got your body calm. You haven't actually addressed the imprint that's there, and it's still poking up. And then it's also poking up in your cognitive and emotional layers. So let's just say you've done your nervous system regulation and you start dating again, or maybe your ex pops back into your life, right? And you suddenly find yourself in a state of self-doubt and confusion. I'm curious how many people have experienced that, right? And now you're like on the phone with your friend and you're like in a 2-hour long conversation about, and maybe you do this with like 3 different people, because you're like, I don't know if that's a red flag or not a red flag. And I don't know if the feelings that I'm having are actually because of my past, or if there's actually something going on. Maybe this is a good thing, or maybe this is a bad thing. You're spinning in confusion. And that's because you're not connected to your intuition. Because your intuition will always guide you correctly. And again, intuition is just all your layers giving you information. So how much time are you wasting, right, when you don't trust yourself? So when you are able to really connect with those 3 foundational layers, and you're able to really listen to what your system is telling you, now you can be clear and you can be confident, right? So basically in this process, what you're learning is there is some system regulation, because that is important. You're combining system regulation with connecting with your intuition and clearing your imprints. So you're kind of doing those in concert together, right? So you don't have to first go out and regulate your system for 3 months and work with a practitioner on that, and then go find another practitioner to kind of talk about all your trauma, and then go to a somatic practitioner and work on that somatic piece, although you might choose to go deeper into some areas than others, of course. But in this process, you're able to combine all 3 of those together, so that you can actually start moving forward much more quickly. All right, so those are the 3 top questions that I received, and I see somebody's in the waiting room, so I'm just gonna admit them really quickly. So I wanted to share, really, really briefly, based on what I just shared now, is that those of you that especially those of you that are here, I know I've communicated with some of you quite a bit, right? You basically have a choice, right? You can continue to play whack-a-mole with your imprints, right? Which is when you kind of deal with your cognitive, and then you're like, oh, now I need to do nervous system regulation. Oh, wait, now my emotions are spinning out of control. And it's like, you're just constantly like playing whack-a-mole, right? With your imprints popping up in all your different layers. So you can continue to do that. Or if it feels right for you, I'd love to have you in Freedom Foundations. And in just 8 weeks, you can embody peace and calm and be able to trust yourself. So I'm going to just very briefly, for those of you that are interested, share about Freedom Foundations, and then I'm going to go into your questions. So Freedom Foundations begins on Friday the 30th. I'm so excited about that. And as I mentioned, it's Freedom Foundations because it's getting freedom on your foundational 3 layers. It's learning how to shift into calm and peace, and being able to connect with your intuition, being able to gain confidence and trust yourself, and get the tools to learn how to trace trauma in your body so you can start clearing imprints on that somatic level. You're also going to learn how to connect on the emotional level, how to distinguish when an emotion is an imprint and when an emotion is actually your intuition, because your emotions can also be intuition, and be able to be really clear on that so that you know what to listen to. So those are some of the core things that we're going to be talking about in Freedom Foundations. And if you're interested in that, the link is here, and I'm going to go ahead and pop it in the chat. And for today, for those of you that are here and replay watchers who get this in time, there is a 24-hour enrollment bonus that is going to end tomorrow, the end of day Monday, today's Sunday, right? Yeah, Monday the 26th. So I definitely encourage you to take advantage of that 24-hour enrollment bonus. And then I also wanted to share for those of you that you've gone to Awaken Your Intuition Masterclass and you came here and you're interested, but you still have questions. Do book a call with me. I'm happy to get on the phone and talk with you about kind of what your questions are. And those of you that have talked with me before know that I'm always really honest with you. I'll let you know if it's a good fit for you or if it's not a good fit, and answer your questions about what you might need if you're feeling stuck and you're not quite sure how to move forward. So I did put those two links in the chat box for those of you that are interested in that. And again, we start Friday the 30th, so I'm doing enrollment this week, through Thursday of this week. So you have a couple days to decide if this is the right fit for you, and if you're ready, like Eric did. Eric experienced this, to shift into peace and calm and confidence. So I look forward to seeing you all there. And now I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions. And then, okay, I understand cognitive, mental, somatic. I'm curious about what is your method for healing the emotional parts. Okay, awesome. We'll touch on that. Eric said that's such a good example. It's really easy to understand the basic principle. I don't know which example you're referring to, because that came up a little while ago, but thank you for that. Oh, the refrigerator. Go ahead.
Yeah, the refrigerator. It was the refrigerator example.
Oh, good.
Yeah, okay. Super easy to understand. Doesn't matter what the problem was, just fix it. Doesn't matter what the cause was. If you fix the problem, it's all good. Right?
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Thank you, Eric.
Mm-hmm.
How can we tap into our intuition as practice? Okay, so I'm going to answer that to the best of my ability. I'm not sure I'm hearing multiple questions in that question, and I'm not sure which one is the one that you are trying to get at. So how can we tap into our intuition as practice? So first, I will say that the foundational practices that I teach in Freedom Foundations are the things that get you into connecting with your intuition, and intuition as practice. And then, yes, you do want to practice. I don't know if that's what you're asking or not, but it is really important to practice. And what I advise my clients is to practice on small things, because often what happens is that we want to be able to make a decision about something. We want to use our intuition when a big decision comes up. My job changes, romantic partners, which college to go to, what have you, right? What career I want to pursue. And if we haven't practiced, then our emotions can really override our intuition, and it's very difficult to distinguish. So I encourage people to practice and really small daily decisions, and you'll be wrong. And it's okay to be wrong. You actually want to be wrong some of the time, because then you start to learn what it feels like to be right and what it feels like when you're wrong. And that's how you're able to really connect with your intuition more and more. But it's really important to understand when it's an imprint, when it's like a trigger, which is run by an imprint, and when it's intuition. Because sometimes I hear people say things like, my intuition told me. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Can you tell me more about that? And they start telling me more about it. And I'm like, I think that might be your emotion, or that might be a trigger or an imprint that's actually speaking. So you do want to practice, but it's important to be able to differentiate between when it's a trigger, an emotion, and when it's intuition. So those are some of those tools of how to do that, some of the things we talk about in Freedom Foundations. There's something else I wanted to say about that. How can we tap into our intuition as practice? I can't remember what the other thing was, but maybe it'll come back to me later. Okay. The other comment here is I grew up, and by the way, those of you that are here, please, I'm going through the comments, but please type question in the chat box if you have a question that you wanted me to address today. Okay. I grew up dissociative, so my brain does that automatically. I noticed in the tattoo making, pain disappeared. What can I do? I do yoga. So I'm not sure which part of when I was talking that you said that. I grew up dissociative, so my brain does that automatically. Do you mean it disconnects from your body? If she's nodding yes. Yeah, you disconnect from your body. Yeah, again, so that's, again, really common to when you've, especially if you've grown up in a difficult home as a child, or you may not even have known that it was difficult. Like for me, I didn't know that my childhood was not good until like about 8 years ago. Because it's just what I knew, what I was used to, right? And I was really disconnected from my body, and I didn't even know that I was disconnected from my body. So that happens. So it's really typical for us to disassociate. And again, the practices that I teach in Freedom Foundations are about connecting with connect with your body, connect with being really present with yourself, connect with your breath. And it's important to do that in a way, you do it slowly, because you don't want to, your body may kick into fight or flight when it realizes that it's that you're slowing down and listening to it, because it's scary, because your trauma is stored in your body. And so that's why you often are disconnected, and it can be scary to kind of reconnect. So for example, there's some breathing practices you can do, and I have a couple private clients who really struggled with that. So they started doing the breathing practice while they were walking. So they weren't sitting still. And then eventually they worked up to doing a few breaths while they were sitting still. And then they worked up to doing more. So that's why having coaching support or some kind of support can be really helpful. So you can understand resistances will come up. And it's helpful to be able to talk through those and be like, okay, why are you resisting doing a breathing practice? What's scary about this? How can we adjust it for you so that you can do it and start getting your body to connect? So yeah, connecting. It's great that you do yoga, Mahalia, things like that. And I hope I'm saying your name right. I'm sorry if I'm not. Things like yoga, especially like yin yoga, which is the really slow yoga, as opposed to like, there's yogas that are more like workout yogas now, right? So the slower ones especially are really good with reconnecting with your body. But if you are disassociated, you want to go slowly, and there's different practices that you can do in order to get there. Okay. What is the process for healing the emotional part? So a big part, there's a couple different parts to that. A big part of that is being able to distinguish when something is a trigger and when something is your emotions. Because as I've said before, I think I said this in the last masterclass, it is not the goal to not have emotions. Like, right, we don't want to be robots just like living a flat life. We want to have emotions, and, you know, happy emotions and high vibration emotions, low vibration emotions, you know, anger, guilt, all those things tell us something. It's information. So healing on the emotional level is learning to understand when it's a raw, kind of pure emotion, when it's a trigger, and then being able to understand if it's a trigger, what's underneath it. And so we go through a process where you learn to understand what's coming up for you underneath that emotion. And as you start having that awareness, then it's what starts releasing, being on that emotional level. Also, the part of connecting with your body actually helps you heal on the emotional level as well, because you'll notice that as you heal on your somatic level, you will experience fewer emotional triggers, which is really interesting. So that's why those 3 foundational layers are so important to be looking at all of them, because they all work together. And then your somatic layers, to me, it's the foundation for everything. It's the foundation for everything. It connects everything. I got distracted because someone's in the waiting room. Okay. Okay, so Mihalia, what you were just clarified while I was talking. I was wondering, because I practice yoga, I read a lot, I'm training a lot, but somehow very rarely I hear my intuition. I know it's there. Yeah. And it could be, you said that you're disassociated, maybe disconnected from your physical. So that's going to be important for you in order to hear your intuition, is to connect with your physical, because there's so much in your body. Yeah. Okay. So question from Laura. If you appear more confident and have more intuition, does the narcissist go find another target for narcissistic supply? I love that question. I've got some previous clients here, so I know they know the answer to that. I almost called in one of you to answer it as I took my water, but yes, the answer is yes. I'll share briefly what I shared. I shared this in the masterclass a couple weeks ago. So, but the answer is yes, because if we think of ourselves, and we are just animals, and if we think of narcissists as being predatory animals and victims of narcissists are prey animals, it's really never that straightforward. I don't actually think there's a predator and a prey. The interaction is much too complex for that. But let's just make it simple. Say there's a predator and a prey. The stronger and more confident the prey is, the predator is not going to attack, or they might test it out and then leave. Because in biology, in animal behavioral ecology, right? Predators there's always a cost benefit analysis that's being done, quickly, instinctually. And a predator does not want to attack something that's going to cause them harm. So that's why, they'll attack the part of the herd that's the weakest, the youngest, the one that's separate because they're ill or something like that. And it's really the same with narcissists, that they can sense, even if this is the interesting part. This is something I hear from people. I'm speaking my boundaries, but people aren't listening to them. Or I've done a lot of healing work and I'm still attracting narcissists. When that happens, I immediately start diving into what's your imprints and what healing work have you done on the foundational levels? Because what that's telling me is you're still putting out a frequency. Remember that antenna? You're still putting out a frequency of whatever it is: vulnerability, low self-worth, overgiving, rescuing, those kinds of things. And a narcissist and any disordered manipulative person absolutely picks up on that. So it doesn't matter what you're saying, or even sometimes what you're doing, if your internal vibration doesn't match it. That's why sometimes when you learn certain tools without understanding what's behind it, you find that they're not as effective as you want them to be. So the short answer is yes. And in fact, something I hear from people is that, and that's something I've experienced also, is narcissists will still show up, but they'll like leave much faster. And then also, as you do this healing work, people may start like dropping out of your life, which can honestly also feel a little isolating, by the way. So if you've experienced that, just hang in there, because things don't happen as quickly as we tend to shift internally very quickly, and then our physical reality takes time to catch up. So as you heal internally, you'll find people start dropping out of your life. You may go through this really lonely period, and then new people will start coming back into your life. I compare it a little bit. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with like alcoholics or addicts and things like that. When they are in recovery, they feel like a brand new person, and they're like, I'm making all these changes, I'm making amends, I'm no longer drinking or whatever, and and they want people to respond to this new version of them. And the people in their life are like, yeah, but you've hurt me for the past 10 years, and I can't just suddenly interact with you differently. For those of you that have experienced that may know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, maybe not a helpful comparison, but it's kind of similar. So that was a really long answer to that question, but yes, narcissists will find other supply. Okay, Mahalia said, true that I'm a high achiever, so I might block myself. But in my case, there was a lot of dissociation as a child. Okay, I think we addressed that. I think you were answering that when we were talking previously. All right, so I've addressed all the questions that are in the chat box. Is anybody here who's here live, does anyone have a question about either anything I shared today or anything I shared in the Awaken Your Intuition masterclass? Or how to implement this in your life? I understand that we can change beliefs, meaning imprints working at the 3 layers. This looks like a statement, but I see a question mark at the end. So I'm trying to understand your question there. So if we change imprints on the 3 layers, does that mean that we are changing our beliefs? For example, I don't think myself worthy. Yes, exactly, Mahalia. So if you don't think yourself worthy, that's a really common imprint that comes up because of the way we experience things as a child. Yeah, and so if you've done some work on that, like therapy or writing affirmations, and it's not shifting, yeah, it's because it's on your other levels as well, and those levels haven't been addressed yet. Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay. Good question. So feel free to unmute yourself, and while I'm waiting to see if anyone else has any questions, I just want to share one more time that a lot of the questions that are coming up here today, right, about connecting with your intuition and shifting beliefs that you have about yourself is exactly the things that we're talking about in Freedom Foundations. And so it's 8 weeks. We're going to meet every week. Covers a lot, but there's also enough spaciousness in there for you all to work on the practices that you learn on your own. And then I provide coaching around what you're experiencing as you implement those. So it's not a kind of do-it-yourself course in the sense of, okay, I have all the, it's not a knowledge course. It's not like, okay, I have all this information and now I don't know what to do with it. It's actually about integrating and embodying. All the work that I do is about embodying the changes or embodying the information so that you can make change in your life. And the practices that you do at home, I see another question, so I'll get to that in a moment. The practices that you would do at home take anywhere from like 5 to 10 minutes. So it's intended to be something that you can easily incorporate into your life. And you don't have to be like, oh my God, am I going to have an hour of homework or an hour of meditation or something like that? So that's the way Freedom Foundations is set up. So go ahead, and if you're interested in that, go over to that link, Freedom Foundation, Veronika Archer /Freedom Foundations. Okay, so a question that I have here, has it happened for you to have a client with healing the body part, somatic and mental, but not healing energetically? Can this be possible or not? Yes. So here today, I'm talking about the bottom 3, the foundational layers, because those are so important. And if you jump into kind of other work without addressing those bottom 3 layers, you may not notice a permanent or long-lasting change. But yeah, absolutely. So then you apply those sort of similar principles to the energetic layers, to the 4th, 5th, and 6th layers. Now, some of them, they're all working together, right? So it's kind of like our bodies, or it is exactly like our bodies, where maybe we have, a thyroid problem, and we fix the thyroid problem, and it fixes like a heart issue, or it fixes a circulatory issue or something else. Your system is all working together. So for purposes of explaining, right, like I divided it into these 7 layers, and we talk about each layer differently, but they all work together. So certainly as you shift and heal on the bottom 3 layers, it impacts your energetic layers as well. But then, yes, and what happens frequently, there's 2 things that happen on the energetic layers. One is that if you're like really solid, like you really shifted in your bottom 3 layers, there's things that I call remnants or shadows, where like your imprints will keep showing up, but like they're not strong. It's just kind of like a little bit. So oftentimes that's because it's still vibrating in your energy field. And then you work on clearing it out in there as well. And then transgenerational trauma can also hang out in our energy fields. And so clearing that out can help. And then the other thing too is that if you're somebody who's really I don't even want to say if you're in tune to it, because I think we all do it. We just don't all notice it. The other important thing about your energy body is that you're receiving information from other people. So it's important to understand how to minimize that. So like in my Sovereign Empath program, I talk about energy hygiene practices that you can do to minimize being affected on the energy body level. And that type of work on the energy level, I also do with my private clients. We actually do touch on it in Freedom Foundations near the end, right? We do touch on that. But the most important thing is getting really solid on your foundational layers. That will help your energy body, and then that will also give you the understanding of what to work on in your energy body layer. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? I think it sort of makes sense. And that's also, Mahalia, why when I work with clients, we really look at all three, the somatic and the cognitive and the energetic. So I talk about all three before as emotional, but also somatic and cognitive and energetic is another. So I look at all three of those because they're all important in healing. And when people get stuck, it's because often they're only focusing on one or two of those. Yeah. That was a really good question. Thank you for all your questions, Mahalia. I really appreciate those and being able to share with you. All right. Thank you all for being here today. It was so nice to hang out with you for an hour. And I hope to see you all in Freedom Foundations on Friday. Bye.